Okay, in this video we're going to talk about the latest quiz, homework 9. This is the quiz. We're going to just go over the answers. And these questions will be in probably a different order than what you saw. So you should see the answers, I believe, when you look at the quiz yourself. FTP protocol does not encrypt traffic. That is true. So if you want to have secure communications, you'd have to be on a VPN or something else tunneling through SSH if you want it to be secure. And you can verify that by running Wireshark while you're sending a file over FTP, and it'll be unencrypted. Dhcp uses the UDP protocol is true, and the reason is for efficiency, that it's more efficient for the network routers to use UDP. For a wireless network, which of these two options is more secure? This one here. So things that you can do is you can make it so the wireless ID does not get broadcast. Here at ISU, there's ISU Secure broadcasting its ID. It's possible to set one up where it doesn't, so that may be some level of security because people won't see it on a list. And you can also filter by a MAC address, by the Ethernet MAC address, so that only specific computers can log in. But if you don't have the traffic encrypted, somebody could still see all the traffic going back and forth between the computers and the router. In addition, even if the SSID is not being broadcast, someone might be able to guess it and log in by joining other network and typing the network name. And it's also possible for a computer to change its MAC address. And in particular, if you're watching the traffic going back and forth between the router and a computer, you'll know that computer's MAC address. And so then you can just fake being that computer. For the LAN of a local area network, the most common addresses for the router itself are these. When you're in a home network, you would typically log into the router by typing the address in. I'm not on a home network right now, but then that would go to the router's administration interface, so you could change options, and these are the most common ones that are used. This question is asking to use rsync. Rsync is a command that will synchronize a folder or set of files from one system to another. Here I'm saying to do recursively my hand-in directory on the system I logged into, and then I'm going to send that to hello world, that host, with this login and that directory. The thing that some people missed, so you're supposed to copy from the hand-in directory to hello. Some people missed that, and some people didn't get this syntax correct. SCP is secure copy, so this will copy a file encrypted from one host to another, and this one here is copying from the local hand-in directory to hello on this server with this account. The question was asking include a command line argument so the files are overwritten. That's -F. That means it's not going to ask, it'll just overwrite files. And so one note is secure copy does encrypt traffic and rsync does not. And you could look at the man page or search Google to get that information. This question is about using DHCP with a router. So if a router is using DHCP, that it will give addresses to connected hosts, but it's still possible to have some computers use a static IP address, a fixed IP address. Typically you would configure the router so that a certain range is for the router to use for DHCP, And then there's another range of addresses that computers can use as fixed IP addresses. And the reason you would want to have fixed IP addresses is if you have some server running within your local network that the IP address doesn't change. This question here had the answer in the question by accident. Logging into the CS server, this is the command, or logging into the X1 server. So SSH will open a secure shell and to X1. This question was asking about running GUI programs like Firefox or image editing or whatever kind of GUI program you might run. It is possible to run programs securely from home, and you would need to have PuTTY and an X server working. And if you want to know how to do that, you would say PuTTY tunnel X server. So this actually would probably be instructions for that. Xming is a program that will run the GUI program on your computer, and PuTTY is used to encrypt the traffic back and forth. It may be slow depending on the program, but it's possible. And if you're on campus at ISU, the traffic to the CS server will be fast enough to be usable. This was opening a connection to CS on port 80 using Telnet. I think this one also had the answer in the question, and the thing that some people missed was 80. If I want to go to port 80, I have to say that. And in general on Telnet, you have to tell it what port. This was just a looking up an acronym. Most people got this. DORA is the stages of DHCP. Discover is the client. Offer is the server. Request is the client. And acknowledgement. So if you search for DORA DHCP, so the client tries to connect to the server offers an IP address, the client requests it, and the server acknowledges it. So all that has to be done before the client knows that it has a certain IP address. And this was about HTTP status codes. This will be if you are looking in Wireshark and you open a web page, you'll see a status. Also, if you go to your network view, let's see. So you can see a page being loaded, and there's a status there that's included in the header. And the status is 200. If we look at the raw header in Wireshark, you would see that 200 in there as well. And 4, anything starting with a 4 is an error. And if you search for status codes, you'll find some information here. That's correct. Yep. And success is a 2. So we saw 200 over there. DNS is the system for assigning host names to IP addresses, and then DNS record has various fields which you'll often see when you do a whois command. I think here for Kenny Jeff we just have the name server, so this is an A record. There are no other, let's do okay, so this is just showing the information about who controls the domain. Okay, there's another command, dig, that'll show the other entries. So here this shows an A record for computationalcomplexity.org and A record for computationalcomplexity.org. So that computationalcomplexity.org goes to this IP address, which is an ISU server, and then we have NS records and A records as well in there. So some of the other, okay, I was just looking up the options to show other records. Computationalcomplexity.org, if it doesn't show the part of the record we're looking for, you can put it as an option. There's the mail server for computationalcomplexity.org. It sends information to one of these, and those will send it along to the server that's running that system. Another command is host. That shows this is the A record and the MX record. There's options you can give for that one as well. Alright, now protocol and default ports, you can just look these up. The following in order from slowest to fastest. So the slowest we have is a home broadband connection, which tends to be somewhere between 1 and 10 megabits per second. And then a wireless network tends to be from anywhere from something like 10 to 100 megabits per second. And then a wired network is like we have on campus, and that tends to be 1 or 10 gigabits per second. And then the fastest is a fiber optic cable, which has much faster maximum speeds. And the precise order, depending on which actual system you're using, could be different, but this is for the normal speeds. Alright, this question is for symmetric encryption. That is where every pair of computers would need to have their own secret key for each other, and the number of combinations is n times n plus 1 over 2, or about n squared over 2. So that's a quadratic number of keys you would need. This question is if you're in a public key system, how many keys do you need? For a public-private key system, each computer needs a public key and a private key, and that is all. So if I want to send a message to somebody, I encrypt it with their public key, and they'll be the only ones that can decrypt it using their private key. The Nginx web server is a different web server than Apache, and it was mainly So I think the answer I have there is wrong. The motivation for Nginx was to handle a larger number of connections than Apache can. So the way Apache works is each connection gets its own thread. At least that's how it traditionally worked. I don't know about currently. And then Nginx was done differently, where a single thread can handle multiple connections. If you have fewer threads, you should be able to scale better. I think that's wrong. I'll fix that. The main advantage, so this is talking about, is Apache preferred because it's free. They're both free. Apache and Nginx are both free, so that's a false. This was mentioned earlier. rsync does not encrypt traffic. If you want your traffic to be encrypted, you'd have to put that in an SSH command. This is about the other difference between rsync and scopy. Scopy just copies the file, so however big the file is, that's how long it'll take. rsync checks to see which files have been updated. If you try to update a directory that has a bunch of files, it'll only send the files that have changed. This makes it much faster. You can synchronize your whole home directory to your computer, and once everything's there, the next time it'll only send things that have been updated. ARP stands for Address Resolution Protocol. That's the protocol that's used to convert port numbers on a switch to, or it's used to convert MAC addresses to IP addresses, or IP addresses to MAC addresses. That's underneath the IP protocol in the Ethernet level. CIDR notation, this is classless, whatever the IDR stands for. So a host that has IP address is this, and then 16 is the subnet, saying that everything in the same local network will have the same first 16 bits, and then the last 16 bits specify the host within the local network. And this is used for routing purposes. Most common dynamic content language used with Apache is PHP. The LAMP is Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. A lot of people said HTML or something else. That's not a dynamic language. Difference between POP3 and Imap. Email protocols, Imap allows multiple connections simultaneously and leaves the messages on the server by default. POP3 was the first email system that was in common usage, and with that system the emails would be downloaded and deleted from the server, and then because of that you could only have one client. If you had another client, different clients or different computers you're using would have only some of your email. Question, which are application layer protocols? ARP is the lowest level out of these, and then IPv6, and then TCP. Those are all below the application layer. And then all the rest of these are protocols that go on top of TCP. So applications, the application layer means that the applications themselves are implementing the HTTP protocol. This would be Apache and the FTP server and email servers that are running on your computer or on a server. Uses for proxy servers, there's two main uses. One is hiding your internet traffic. What happens here is you send your traffic encrypted to the proxy, and the proxy then sends it out to what you actually wanted. You could look at a picture. So any of these pictures is showing the same thing. If you want to get some information, you send it to the proxy, and then the proxy sends it along to whatever you want, and the responses come back through the proxy server as well. And your ISP would be in the middle here somewhere, and this data here on these lines are encrypted, so your server does not know what they are or even where they're going. So that's one use for privacy. And then another use is that you may be able to access resources that you wouldn't normally be able to, that may be blocked. So my ISP may block traffic over a certain port, but then if I go through a proxy server, I could use a different port and the proxy server will send it along. Or my ISP may block access to Google, But if I access Google through the proxy server, the ISP doesn't know that I'm going to Google. The only way that the ISP could prevent you would they would have to block the proxy as well. BGP is the name of the protocol used to route traffic. Routing traffic is given an IP address, get the information to that IP. On a local network, that uses ARP. But once you need to go outside of your local network, you need to have some way to find out where to send the packets in the world, and BGP is the protocol for that, the border gateway protocol, to send traffic in between ISPs. Which protocols are traditionally connectionless? So TCP is connection oriented and Imap is connection oriented. DHCP runs on top of UDP. UDP is connectionless. There's no synchronization or acknowledgement. You just send packets. IP is just packets as well. There's no synchronization there. And HTTP, in the typical case, is connectionless. There are options that you can do to try and keep connections. And for this one, if you got for these multiple answer ones, if you got some of them right, I give you half credit. Which of these protocols sends information unencrypted? You can see the answers. The S on SSH and SFTP is for secure. Wireless protocols, you should never use WEP. It still shows up in routers even though it was cracked a while ago. If you use WEP, there's fairly simple ways to break it that you can download from the internet. So you should generally use WPA2 on your home network. The most common part of the electromagnetic spectrum that's used for wireless transmissions is radio. There are some that use microwave, and there are some experiments with using visible light for data transmission, but for now, most of it is by radio waves. All of these cell phone, wireless networking, and walkie-talkies, just different parts of the radio spectrum. And ARP is the protocol for mapping between an IP address and a MAC address. That is the quiz.